Is Joe Biden, let's put it exactly the way it is Joe Biden buying votes for $10,000 vote?
We have a lot of young people that work on my TV show. They're not making 125 grand. They're now eligible to get, in some cases, up to 20,000, in other cases, 10,000. And this is new Green Deal radical socialism.
It would be like someone who is addicted to heroin, who is going through horrendous withdrawals. And there's a certain person in the room who says, well, only thing we can do to do away with these withdrawals is give them another bump of heroin.
Those are just some of the bizarre reactions from Fox hosts to Biden's plan to cancel some student debt for millions of Americans. And can I just say to Sean Hannity that I, for one, am totally in favor of members of my team getting student debt relief if they're eligible. Biden's plan forgives $10,000 for many borrowers and up to 20 grand for low and middle income borrowers who also received Pell Grants. It also extends the repayment freeze one final time until the end of this year. Right-wing media and GOP lawmakers were quick to call the plan a handout and unfair. But the criticism isn't just coming from the right. Some quote-unquote centrist Democrats are also complaining. Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, who's currently running for the Senate, said in part that waiving debt for those already on a trajectory to financial security sends the wrong message to the millions of Ohioans without a degree working just as hard to make ends meet. New Hampshire Congressman Chris Pappas argues President Biden didn't have authority on the matter, saying in a statement that this announcement is no way to make policy and sidesteps Congress and our oversight and fiscal responsibilities. Pappas's concerns do raise an important issue. Biden's plan may not survive the courts. Since it would be implemented by executive action, it's likely to face legal challenges. The centrist think tank Third Way tells the Washington Post such a challenge could be based on a recent Supreme Court ruling that says the federal government can't act on policy with broad economic significance without clear congressional authorization. And with the current hard-right majority on the Supreme Court, Biden's student loan forgiveness ambitions could be quashed before anyone gets to take advantage. The president hasn't yet addressed these potential legal challenges, keeping his focus Wednesday on those who stand to benefit, especially those who could see their remaining balances completely eliminated.
That's 20 million people who can start getting on with their lives. All this means people can start, finally crawl out from under that mountain of debt, to get on top of their rent and their utilities, to finally think about buying a home or starting a family or starting a business. And by the way, when this happens, the whole economy is better off.
To talk more about Biden's student loan relief plan, let's turn to Wisconsin Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan, a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Congressman, thanks for coming back on the show. What are your thoughts on the Biden student debt plan? Does it go far enough? Some on the left of your party say it doesn't, that it's only a drop in the ocean compared to the total of $1.6 trillion of federal student loan debt.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I think it's a really great announcement and a great move to help both the economy and to help society. So many people have student debt. I was listening to the radio the other day and someone was 60 years old and they're still paying off their student debt. That isn't good for that individual. That's not good for their family. And it's not ultimately good for the economy. So what the president did is relieve what he said he was going to do when he ran. Once again, kept to his word, $10,000 worth of debt, but also $20,000 for people who are Pell Grant recipients. I was a Pell Grant recipient. I grew up in a lower middle class family. So the families and the people who need it the most are going to get the most benefit. And I think this is a really strong move.
And it's not just criticism from the left. Some on the right of your party are not in lockstep with this Biden plan. You have Maine Congressman, for example, Jared Golden, who says this plan is, quote, out of touch with what the majority of the American people want from the White House, which is leadership to address the most immediate challenges the country is facing. And I mentioned Ohio Congressman, your colleague Tim Ryan earlier, who also says, quote, instead of forgiving student loans for six-figure earners, we should be working to level the playing field for all Americans. What would you say to your colleagues on the right of the party who are pretty scathing about the plan and the president?
Well, there's all kinds of good things that we're doing for different people. When we did the infrastructure bill, that's going to create 1.5 million new jobs, a lot of them blue collar jobs that are going to be done by people in many cases without college degrees. But we've done something to help those people and their families. In this case, we're helping some people who have a college education, and in many cases, Pell recipients from some of the poorest families. So, you can help lift everyone's boat and do the right thing. And I think the president keeps doing the right thing. And this is just one more of those proposals.
Some critics also argue that Biden's plan doesn't address the root cause of this issue, which is the outrageous cost of a college education in America in 2022. How do you address that, Congressman? Because without action there, debt cancellation is just a temporary Band-Aid.
Well, and that's a very valid concern we all should have. We want to make sure that people aren't priced out of education. If you're smart enough and capable enough, you should be able to get that higher education. That's why I support things like Pell Grants and student loans, as well as grants. And, I think that is a very real issue that we are looking at in a number of ways in Congress. Some of those private colleges that folded and left students with a lot of debt, the president also fixed that situation, but those were some of the worst actors that are out there. Many of them don't exist anymore. So I think there is some forward movement on that, but I think we can continue to work on affordability while we're dealing with people who currently have debt and relieving some of that.
Just circling back to what we were discussing a moment ago about your colleagues' criticisms, just from a political point of view, and I know you addressed the substance of them, you said we're doing stuff for these people and we're doing stuff for these people, a good response. Just from a political perspective, it's a midterm year. Is it helpful to have high-profile Democrats like Tim Ryan running for the Senate, basically lambasting the president's signature plan on student debt?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment directly on anyone's comments. I would tell you what I'm saying when I go around my district and as I go and help other people in other districts, which I am doing, that this is a great move. This benefits a lot of people. This is good for the economy. It's good for society. We want more people to be able to get higher education and get into jobs that can continue to pay well and pay taxes that supports the overall government. There's no reason to take one idea down when there's other good ideas. Instead, I think we can talk about all the good that's come out of this session and this administration, from the rescue plan to the infrastructure bill, to the CHIPS Act, to the Inflation Reduction Act, and now something like this. We've done a lot to help real people. Let's just celebrate all of those things. That's my attitude.
It's a very diplomatic answer, Congressman. I want to turn to Tuesday's election results. We saw New York Democrat Pat Ryan defeating Republican Mark Molinaro in a House special election that was seen as a bellwether for November. Congressman-elect Pat Ryan spoke to my MSNBC colleague Alex Wagner on Wednesday night about his campaign. Have a listen.
As a politician in a swing district who's trying to win a seat, hold on to a seat, how much are the words Donald Trump uttered?
I mean, we are not afraid to call out Donald Trump as someone who I believe is essentially traitorous at this point. Threats to democracy are now top of mind above all these other issues for people. It's this cumulative effect of, okay, in 48 hours, you put more assault weapons on the street, you ripped away reproductive freedom and access to abortion, then you dismantled the EPA. We're hearing more about January 6th. We see what's continuing to happen with the president. It's just guardrails of democracy increasingly being hit, and that is a wake-up call for folks.
Has your soon-to-be new colleague Pat Ryan found the key for Democratic Party messaging going into November, that Democrats can and should lean into all these issues and not follow the more cautious advice of those who say, stick to economic issues, quote unquote, kitchen table issues, as if kitchen table issues don't include abortion rights and democracy and standing up to GOP extremism?
Well, and we just saw in some polling, the number one issue in a recent poll was around democracy as an issue because people are concerned about their country, and that's going to affect their families. Look, I was yesterday in Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. It's an open seat that Democrats have to hold. Ron Kine is retiring. A guy named Brad Pfaff is running as a Democrat. But we did an event. The Republican candidate in that district went to the insurrection using his campaign funds, and he got in a fight with a 17-year-old library intern over an LGBTQ book display, and then he proceeded to check out all the books but one because someone was reading it. I mean, there are some wackos running out there, and we need to be able to set the differences out there that you can either have an extremist who thinks attending the insurrection is proper behavior for a member of Congress, or you elect someone like Brad Pfaff or the Brad Pfaffs across the country who are going to talk about these issues in a much stronger way. And I think Congressman-elect Ryan has got it exactly right, and I hope more people run like that.
One last question, Congressman. In Florida, we saw a big progressive win with Maxwell Frost winning his Democratic primary in Florida's 10th district. He's now likely to become one of the first Gen Z members of Congress. I know you went to Florida to campaign for him. What was that like?
Yeah, you know, he's a great candidate, and this is what we need if you're going to have diversity in Congress. Diversity is not 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds, right? We need to broaden it, and having our first Gen Z member, someone who's a really talented community organizer, had support within the community from labor across the spectrum to win a 10-way primary. This is the future of the Democratic Party. We need to have more candidates like this, and I'm glad that groups like the Progressive Caucus were strongly behind Maxwell. He's going to be an outstanding member of Congress.